Janice has as much time as she needs to with her presentation, but so many familiar faces today. I don't need to give the whole background on what we're doing here, but you're all here on the CO Executives in Transition initiative that's designed by the CO Forum. The initiative aligns expressly with the CO Forum and everything that we do. And we are in our third quarter, heading into summer almost. I can't believe we're almost here. So thanks everybody for being here. I would like to just stress, and I've brought it up in the last few meetings, that what we've created here really has been something to accompany you on your journey as you're in transition, considering a transition, and also landing your new role. So please share with us, and so we can celebrate with you, and everybody in this group can celebrate with you. Most of you probably have seen that Jay Mitchell, who was with us from the very beginning, landed a new job and shared that on LinkedIn. So if you haven't, go connect with Jay and share the congratulations with him. Terry Cannon also is in a new role, which is exciting for her. And please share with us, because we want to be able to share with you and your and celebrating with you. And if you roll back into the CO role, reach out to us, because we'd love to have you as our guest at the CO Forum meetings. We hold 4 global meetings monthly, and would be great to have you with us. As far as meeting courtesy, when Janice isn't talking, if you don't mind, please mute so there's no background noise. We always run business first, so if you have to leave the meeting for any reason or go off screen, no problem at all. Let's keep to business language, no politics. We will record this meeting as usual, and it'll be posted in the Mighty Network for you for later viewing, or to share with anybody that you run into that needs support from this organization. Keep all your job prospects confidential as well. And then if you have any questions for Janice, we'll all be monitoring the chat. Just post in there and we can address those. If you have any issues throughout the week, need any support or anything at all on the CO Executives in Transition, we all know that Fiona is the one that takes care of all of you. So reach out to her at any time. With that, I would like to welcome Janice Litvin. Janice, I'm super excited that she's here, and I just really enjoy getting to know you. And I'm glad that you can share with your group the expertise you have on banishing burnout. So I will give a little background on Janice. She is on a mission to help leaders and teams banish burnout in their organization so their employees can come to work healthy, happy, and ready to work. She does this through keynote speeches, workshops, and accountability groups. Her new book, Banish Burnout Toolkit, chosen by Society for Human Resource Management for their recertification library. Janice helps you learn how to manage stress to prevent burnout. The result is long-lasting behavioral change. What makes Janice unique is her 20 years of technology recruiting, 10 years in IT, study of psychology, and experience changing her own behavior. Now, going from stressed out to negative, which I can particularly use today, to being happy and healthy. Please welcome National Speakers Association member Janice Litvin.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Just a quick note to let you know that you can modify the size of your slide versus the size of my face by bringing your cursor up to in between my face and the slides, and a little thin vertical line should appear, and then you can drag if you choose to. Thank you so much, Laura, and to Fiona Murray and Bill Shepard for having me. I'm so happy to be here. And as Laura said, I'm on a mission to help leaders and teams banish burnout in their organizations. Bill Shepard has been instrumental in bringing me on, so thank you so much for that. So let's give everybody a hand on the COO Forum executive team. And let's have a hand for all our stress. Woo! Yay, stress. And let's hear it for being quarantined for a whole year. And now it's even 13 months. I think we're starting to loosen up a little. We actually had dinner inside a restaurant last night, so that was exciting. Saw some human beings for once in person. And let's hear it for all our relatives who want to argue about politics and then get mad that we never call them. Woohoo! But seriously, you've probably never cheered for stress before. Usually stress just seems to happen. It just seems to come upon us. And then we feel anxiety and negative feelings. And we can't necessarily stop all those stressful things from happening. But what we can do is we can change the way we react. And that's what I'm going to show you today, how to modify your behavior interrupt those negative thoughts so that you can approach life, especially while you're in transition, a little calmer. And I know that looking for a job can be very, very stressful. As a tech recruiter for 20 years, I helped people like yourselves look for a new position, and I know how stressful it is, but it's very important to stay calm, because as you're going into interviews, interviewers can sense your feelings and your nerves. So it's really important to stay calm as you go into interviews. As Laura mentioned, my new book is Banish Burnout Toolkit. Most of the things I talk about today will be in the book. And if you stay to the end, you're all receiving a free copy of the book. And so that will reinforce everything we talk about today. All my slides are pretty much in the book. First, let's start with a very quick icebreaker. Put in the chat your name, your location, and when you think of stress, what is one word that comes to you? And so I'm going to wait just a moment and take a look at the chat. Shannon, welcome. I see one. Let's see. So what is one word? Put in the chat the one word that comes to your mind when you think about stress. Distraction, anxiety, breath. Yes, breath is good. Two more, let's see here. Uncertainty, recursive thinking, that sounds like a mathematician. Anxiety, yes. So, yes, lack of sleep. Oh my gosh, sleep is such a big one. I talk about sleep in the book. Oh, Minneapolis. Julio is in Minneapolis. Frederick is in Boston. I love Boston. Okay, so yes, all those words apply. Now what I want you to do is think about what is one thing that you would consider a silver lining about the COVID-19 or the coronavirus. What's one thing you can think of that was a positive? And now put that in the chat. What's one positive thing that More Family Time says, oh, I can't see it. Finished my basement. Oh, that's good. You know what's funny is I finished my book because I had more time. Focus on self-improvement, more open. Companies being more open to virtual work. Yes. More recipes. Yeah, I'm sorry I can't see your names. Oh, that was Izzy. Izzy cooked more recipes. Wonderful. So, of course, there are all kinds of stressors. There are big stressors and small stressors. Things like life-threatening medical emergencies, financial disaster, or living with a teenager. So based on my deep scientific knowledge, stress can be big or small. And whether it's big or small, it can cause a huge emotional reaction in you. Some people, have you ever been cut off on the freeway and then you start screaming at the other car, but no one can hear you? And that I do that all the time. So stress can cause all kinds of reactions, can't it? Whether it's a long line at Starbucks or traffic, or what about a little identity theft? This is a true story. I opened my email one Sunday morning and I received this email from Apple, just like this. It had the Apple logo. So I thought, oh yeah, this is from Apple. Dear Ms. Litvin, thank you for your purchase from Apple Books. Enclosed is a receipt for your book. If this is an error, click here. Now, I know what you're thinking. Don't click, don't click. I mean, when I got an email from the Prince of Nigeria asking to deposit $4 million into my bank account, I knew not to click. But on this day, I'm sorry to say I clicked. And what happened next was not a pretty picture. I immediately, so on the next page, it said, in order to help you, we need to gather some information. You know what's coming. So I'm entering name, address, phone number, credit card number, debit card number, social security number. The antenna finally went up and I realized I don't think they need my social security number to process a refund. And so I shut down my computer, logged out of email, shut down my computer, as if that was going to stop anybody after they'd already collected so much information. And I got on hold for a long time, waited for Apple. The nice young man, Dimitri, said, "Oh yeah, we knew about that. That's, everybody knows about that one." I'm like, "I didn't know about that one. Why didn't you tell me?" And so you can imagine what happened next. I had this poor man, young man, Dimitri, told me to cut up my debit card and credit card, call the bank, you know, notify the credit report, the 3 credit reporting agencies. And back then, this was several years ago, where it took 2 full business weeks to get your new cards. And you can imagine the frustration and the stress. How am I going to pay for groceries? How am I going to get my coffee? How am I going to get my hair done? You know, the really important things. So what did I learn from this process besides not clicking and being more careful where I clicked? After I calmed down and stopped complaining to my family, I learned that getting very, very upset did not help the situation. If anything, it made it worse. I couldn't think clearly. I was so nervous. My hands were shaking when I was trying to write down all the instructions from this sweet young man, Dimitri. And being upset only hurt me. It didn't hurt anybody else. It certainly didn't hurt the person trying to steal my identity. Now that I have perspective on how letting my emotions get out of control causes trouble, I've learned that I can interrupt those negative thoughts. And in a few minutes, I'm going to teach you some techniques that I hope you'll see that will help you. So are you in control of your emotions? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I mean, sometimes things are horrible. And yes, we all have normal human reactions to stressful situations. Is this you? This used to be me, getting really upset whenever I had to argue with the bank about something or wait on hold for the cable company. And I would get very upset. But what I have learned is that if I can go a little closer to this kind of person, I'll be a happier person. So the question I have for you is, how low do you go and how long do you stay there? What that means is, how upset do you get and how long do you dwell in those negative feelings? When something happened or someone was rude to me, I would get so upset and complain to my family for days at a time. One day, my son, who is now 27, at the time he was about 10, said, "Mom, why are you so upset? You were upset yesterday. Why do you stay upset for so many days?" When a child feeds back to you negative behavior, it's time to sit up and pay attention, isn't it? And so what I'm going to show you today is how I made the leap from out of control, negative, overreacting, to a little bit of a happier person, like the young man on going to the beach. Now, I'm not naive, and I realize that workplace stress is a little different from long lines, traffic, or even a little identity theft. I know that it can be relentless and debilitating. You're trying to solve complicated well, first of all, if you're looking for a job, that can be stressful in and of itself. But once you land, you're trying to solve complicated company-wide problems related to marketing or finance or operations, making strategic decisions, and sometimes solving personnel problems. And also the always-on nature of our lifestyles has made our lives that much more complicated. So Dr. Hans Seeley was one of the original researchers in the area of stress. And he declared, and this was many years ago, obviously, that stress comes from uncertainty, lack of information, and loss or lack of control. And of course, we've all experienced that this past year, dealing with the coronavirus, not knowing what's coming, not knowing how long we were going to be quarantined, all the various information coming at us, and certainly the lack of control. He also taught us that it's not the stress that kills us, it's our reaction to it. So Fiona, let's bring up our first poll. How often do you feel stressed? Almost never, occasionally, at least once a week, or on most days? So please answer the poll and then click submit. And I will take a moment. How are the results, Fiona? For some reason, I can't see the results. Oh, there we go. Now I see them. Thank you. Almost never, 7%, occasionally 40%, 33% said at least once a week, and 20% said on most days. When I do this poll, most of the time, the third and the fourth options are the winners, but today it's occasionally, so that's good. I'm happy to see that. Okay. Okay, so now I can get rid of that. Okay, good. So let's do some numbers. I'm not all about the numbers, but I think sometimes some numbers are important. So this data comes from 2018. At that time, 67% of employees were already approaching burnout, 2/3 of American workers. And since January, Deloitte did a study that said that 77% of workers say they've experienced burnout at their current job. So what exactly is burnout? Well, the World Health Organization declared burnout as a syndrome, an occupational syndrome caused by chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. And what happens when we're that stressed out? We're complaining, we're spreading negativity, we're even starting to call in sick. And when we are at work, we're not really as focused and productive as we could be. And then we really do get sick. We get migraine headaches, the stress hormone cortisol level goes up, the immune system function goes down, and a variety of problems start to happen, and even possibly coronary artery disease. And then what happens? Emotionally, we start to lose passion for a job that we used to love. We feel exhausted mentally, physically, and emotionally. We're more sensitive to feedback. We feel ineffective. We avoid phone calls and emails, and we get disengaged. We isolate. Now, how can you tell if you're burning out? Well, it could be certain behavior patterns, like maybe snapping. At the beginning of the COVID, I thought, oh, we already work from home. My husband uses one space. I have my home office, and my son has his studio in the garage. He's a musician. And so I thought, oh, we already work from home, no biggie. But I realized eventually, how much I missed seeing people, my friends, obviously. And one day I was snapping at my family. This was maybe 2 or 3 months into the COVID. And I thought to myself, wow, maybe I am getting a little burned out on COVID. And this was back then. So I had to, even as aware as I am of myself, I had to really pay attention. Some people get digestive issues. Some people have angry outbursts, sleep problems. Sleep problems are a huge indicator, and also eating problems are a huge indicator, and then other feelings. And burnout is costing the nationally annual burnout healthcare spend is up to 125 to 190 billion with a B. And this was very personal to me because I was there. This was several years ago. I felt overwhelmed. I would get angry. I would set myself up to feel rejected. Every time somebody talked to me crosswise, I would dwell on it and complain for days and days. But eventually I realized that I didn't want to live my life like that any longer. I didn't want to always feel negative and then hang on to it for days. And I would get knots in my stomach. I'd be hard to live with, took things very personally, overreacted to things, just very negative. And then I went through a big change, which I will describe in just a moment. And what I have found that I'm hoping will help you is that when you dig deep into your thoughts and patterns of behavior, that is when you can make a change. But first, you have to become aware. And this will impact everyone around you, your family, your team, when you get to your new work, and your customers, whether they're internal or external. So how did I make this change? How did I find out what I needed to do? Well, of all things, it happened at a family reunion. This is my mother, may she rest in peace, at a family reunion party on the East Coast. She and my father met on the East Coast, so he had a lot of relatives, and we decided to go to this party. We were having a really good time, at least in the moment that this picture was taken. And we had eaten, we had drunk, we had danced, and we were feeling pretty happy. So we decided to take a little break, get a little sip of water, and suddenly across the room, we see two of the female cousins, Marcia and Marlene, chatting, looked like friendly party chatter. And my mother, who I loved very much and taught me many, many lessons, but she was very critical. And she jumped right into first gear. Somebody should have told them the 80s are over. Just very critical. Then she jumped into second gear. This chicken tastes like rubber. Don't they know how to cook on the East Coast? Suddenly she drove right into fifth gear. Wonder what they're talking about with their heads all huddled together. There was no reason to be so negative and so critical and to feel left out, to feel rejected. But in that moment, I was hit over the head with a bolt of lightning, and I realized that I had inherited my mother's feelings of rejection. It was like watching an actor on a stage, her voice breathing life into the thoughts that had been plaguing me my entire adult life. And in that moment, I made a decision that I could change, and I was going to figure out how. I did not want to live my life always complaining and negative, taking everything too personally, and setting myself up to feel rejected. And I decided I have a choice how I want to go through life and how I want to feel. And one of the lessons, I learned many lessons along the way, which I'm going to show you in a couple of minutes. But one of the biggest lessons I learned as I was researching was the importance of emotional intelligence. The World Economic Forum declared in 2020 that emotional intelligence was more important than technical skills. As you probably know, many, many people get promoted for technical skills, and they need to go through some sort of training to understand how important emotional intelligence is and how important the sound of our voice and the words we say can impact people in a big way. So how do you change? I did not want to, this had been me, as I said earlier, and I wanted to change. Now, before I get into the how, I want to say this. I know that many people are glass half full kind of people, and they think, oh, I'm okay, I'm a happy person. Well, in that case, what I'm about to share with you can be helpful as you're trying to guide others. And you can impact the teams in your new position. And so what happens with behavior change is getting out the figurative pickaxe and digging deep into your thought processes, into an area that neuroscientists call the neural pathways. Neural pathways, which some of you may know, are basically patterns of thinking and patterns of behavior. In my case, I always jumped to the negative. And what we want to do is turn that around and decompose the negative patterns and convert them. And I'm going to tell you all about that. And also, as I said before, you're going to get my Banish Burnout Toolkit at the end. So neural pathways, as I said, are patterns, just like learning how to balance on a bike. So if you can think back to either you learning how to ride a bike or helping a child learn how to ride a bike, you remember that at first you couldn't stay on, you were kind of wobbly, and then suddenly you stay on. Well, the neural pathways are similar to that process where you learn to develop new thought patterns and anchor them into your behavior. And this is the beginning of behavior change. What's important is the messages you may have received as a child from teachers or parents, or maybe even peers, or it could have even been from an earlier job. So, for example, in my childhood, as I said before, I had wonderful, loving parents, but they were also very, very critical and had very high expectations. And so, here are a couple of examples of what the critical little things that they did. That homework is so messy. Start over. That's not perfect. You're going out in that. Orange is not your color. You made all A's last semester. Why aren't you making all A's this semester? Your brother makes all A's. And when a child constantly receives these criticisms over and over again, they internalize them. They believe them because the parent is their guide. The parent loves them, and they believe everything that parent says. And then they internalize them and develop limiting beliefs, which translate to, I'm not good enough, I'm not pretty enough, and I'm not smart enough. And this process impacts anyone who is trying to learn how to manage stress. So based on my 20 years in human resources and my study of psychology and my own work on myself, I developed this process so that you can learn, you and I can learn how to manage stress so that we don't burn out. And my work is based loosely on a foundation known as cognitive behavior therapy that was co-developed by Dr. Albert Ellis in New York. And he taught, we can't change the past, so we change how we are thinking, feeling, and behaving today. And the key point is that you can change your reactions with awareness and some techniques. And it's important to note that whether the stressor is a big deal or not, whether it's loss of a job or some traffic, the way we react and the way we behave are rooted in the same patterns of behavior. And this is important because we're going to learn how to change that behavior. We're going to look at how to interrupt negative thoughts, how to identify typical reactions to stress, and then how to change them. And I will share with you how I made that change myself. When we are finished, this puzzle will be all filled in. Now, it's important to know that our thoughts control our feelings and our behavior. So first, let's jump right in to how you react to stress physically. It all starts with the physical. Have you ever been in a meeting and you made a suggestion and someone said, oh no, that won't work. We don't do things like that, or something to that nature, something very negative? If you're paying attention, your body is telling you that you're stressed. You may not notice it at the moment because you're trying to act professional and you don't want to get into an argument, and maybe you sit quietly. But after the meeting, this is a true story. This happened to me. And after the meeting, when someone was rude, I noticed that my stomach had little knots in it. And I said to myself, I wonder why I have knots in my stomach. I had completely forgotten about it because I was trying to push it down. And I realized that I had these knots. And it's really important to pay attention to those little signs and triggers that you might have had a reaction. Sometimes being aware of those physical reactions are the only indicator that we're having a reaction. So what are your physical reactions to stress? Put in the chat. As I said, mine are knots in my stomach. Some people talk about stiff neck, clenched jaw. One woman even told me she gets rashes. So put in the chat, what are your physical reactions to stress? Hands shaking, yes. Migraines, yes. Gnashing of teeth, anger, loss of focus, yes. Heart rate goes up, headaches from Keith. Joanne, knots in her shoulder. Picking at fingernails, I used to do that. I know exactly what that's about. Heartbeat, yes. So as I said, it's really, really important to pay attention to those little signs because sometimes that's the only indicator. And what happens if we ignore those signs? Eventually, we explode because we haven't had an outlet. We haven't had a way to pay attention and get those out. And for those of you who like the Warriors, we're a big basketball family. And you San Francisco Bay Area people will recognize Draymond Green, one of the better players, but who's always getting thrown out of the game for yelling at the referees. He needs to learn how to banish his burnout. And so cognitive behavior therapy helps you reframe your thinking. So let's jump into the first tool in my toolkit, which is the stop and audit tool. Let's start with stop. What does stop stand for? Stop means stop. What was that little beeping noise? Did you guys hear that? Stop, take a breath, observe, and then proceed. So what happens when you take a really deep breath? It actually does have an effect on the nervous system. When you observe what's going on, you can interrupt the negative play that's going on in your head, and then you can make a choice. This acronym was developed by John Kabat-Zinn, the father of modern day mindfulness. And this is the first trick for engaging the rational part of the brain, because when we're having it's normal human behavior to have a reaction to something stressful. But at first, that reaction is going to be extreme emotions. And when you stop and breathe and observe, then you can go back to engaging the rational mind. Like, have you ever been in a car accident? Someone rear-ended you or sideswiped you. And at first, it's rather upsetting, having the car smashed, you know, the fear of maybe getting hurt. But you also have to remember that you have to take the person's driver's license and insurance, and you have to remember some practical things. That's an example of engaging the rational mind. And it was Rollo May who taught that human freedom comes from the ability to pause so that you can breathe before you respond and think before you react. And that is exactly what the stop tool is all about. Interrupting negative thoughts and grabbing control. And that will serve you very well in stressful situations. And even in interviews or negotiation, which you're going to have a wonderful negotiation speaker in a few weeks. But it's really important to stop and breathe. The second half of the first tool is called the stress audit. And the purpose of the stress audit is to help you untangle your emotions to understand what happens. When you write with a pen and paper, a part of the brain is initiated that gets you thinking a little more alert, a little more clearly, so that you can understand your stressful reactions. And it was Daniel Pink, author of Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us, who taught that you don't even know what's bothering you deep down until you start writing. It's like magic. So now when someone is rude or I get upset at something someone said to me, I sit down and write, and digging deep, I can find out what's really bothering me. And this is where the healing begins and the behavior change can begin, because you can begin to understand your emotions. And the more you practice, the better you will get at identifying what's bothering you. So now let's jump to the second tool, which is looking at the characteristics of common stress reactions. This is tool number 2 in my Banish Burnout toolkit. The first one we're going to talk about is overreacting. This is the most common stress reaction. Have you ever heard yourself say, I was so angry, I couldn't think straight? So that's what this is, the overreaction. Let me give you some examples that I hope will resonate with you. What stresses you out? Is it the whole idea of having to look for a new job? Worrying about finding a suitable position where you get along with the CEO and the rest of the team? Is it the expectations of a new position and hoping that the corporate culture will be a fit for you? If you're a woman, is it having a seat at the table at this new position? Is it setting new policies for returning to work and other issues like that? So when we're upset and we lose control, we don't stay grounded in rational thinking. It's normal human reaction to react. But what's not healthy is to stay there and dwell there. And when we are there, that is the amygdala, or the fear, fight, flight, or freeze part of the brain that's in control. But what we want to do is we want to grab control from the amygdala and give it to the prefrontal cortex, the executive functioning part of the brain. And the way we do that is we put a reality spin on the situation. Here's an example. I don't know what to ask for in my next salary discussion. I'm afraid if I ask for too much or too little, they won't make an offer at all. And we get all bundled up in these kind of nervous thoughts. Or we could reality spin it. Salary discussions always make me nervous, but I can do some research. I can ask a mentor or a search consultant or a negotiation expert how to handle this question. Now let's jump to the second most common reaction, which is overgeneralizing. Here's some examples. My assistant always takes a long lunch. Dealing with overseas suppliers always causes legal issues. Software change initiatives never proceed as planned. The FDA's demands are always unreasonable for those of you in biotech. There are always gigantic problems at budget time. So how could we reality spin one of those? Well, for software change initiatives, and by the way, I have an IT background, so I'm intimately familiar with software problems. So the reality spin would be, do software changes always seem unmanageable, or is it just the last time because it was a particularly difficult situation? And by the way, one thing I wanted to point out is in these statements, you will see the word always or never. And when you catch yourself saying always or never, it's good to stop and reality spin. Here's another one. My assistant always takes a long lunch. Well, is it really true that your assistant always takes a long lunch, or does it just seem that way because during a recent crisis, the assistant was nowhere to be found? So again, when we are stressed, we are letting the amygdala be in control. When we take care of reality spinning and doing stop and audit, we're giving control to the prefrontal cortex. While you're writing in the stress audit, while you're doing all that writing and analyzing, the amygdala is dumping. But when you go back and reread it, the prefrontal cortex is now analyzing. And that's how we reframe our reactions. So awareness brings knowledge. And as I said, the prefrontal cortex helps us reframe our reactions. So far we've talked about stop and audit, overreacting and overgeneralizing. And it's important to remember that there are things in life we can't control and things in life we can't control. When traffic is heavy, we can't control the traffic. We can either choose not to go out at that time, or we can put on some soft music or a funny podcast, or even make a hands-free phone call to a friend we haven't talked to in a long time. So it's important to remember what you can and can't control. Now let's jump to the next tool I want to talk about that, and that is healthy boundaries. Sometimes healthy boundaries is the power of saying no, or the power of pushing back. Have you ever said yes to someone or something that you really wish you had said no to? Have you ever in your life, maybe when you were younger, accepted a salary package because you really needed a job and you weren't completely happy? What did you learn from that experience? Are you a people pleaser, or do you communicate what your needs are? Especially during negotiations, setting limits allows you to avoid potentially toxic environments. So my best advice is follow your gut. Are you the kind of person that lets all these interruptions in and lets people have access to you at all times? Or do you try to control your time a little better and say, okay, from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. or 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., I'm going to close my door, and then I'm going to let everybody know that I do have an open door policy from 10 to noon or 12 to 5 or whatever it is. So setting limits for your work life so that you can get done what you need to get done and stay in control of your situation. And by the way, setting those boundaries at the beginning lets people know what they can expect from you rather than trying to change them later. So now when someone asks me to do something, I'll say, instead of saying yes or no, I'll say, I'll check my calendar and let you know if or when this will be a fit, so that I don't quickly say yes to things and then have to go undo them. And, you know, in the last year, the last 13 months, with all these millions of Zoom meetings and people on LinkedIn who act like they have a lot in common with you when what they really want is to sell you something, I've learned to say, no, I don't have time right now for that appointment where you want to sell me something, protein powder or whatever they want to sell. So now I say, I'm swamped for the next month, but we can check our calendars back then. And you can always feel them coming. So what does setting boundaries do for you? Again, it engages the prefrontal cortex, gives you control, keeps you grounded so that you can communicate in a rational way what your expectations are. What healthy boundaries can you set? I want you to think about that as you're approaching your new job. So we talked about the stop tool, stop, take a breath, observe, proceed. And then I throw this little twist on it called 999. Will this event matter in 9 days, 9 weeks, or 9 months? If not, don't let it get you so upset. So just imagine a work-life situation where you work a reasonable workday and you feel like you can manage your workload by knowing when to say no or setting a boundary, that you know how to communicate rationally when work is getting out of hand, and that when you are upset, you have tools you can use. My hope for you is that you will see yourself differently from now on, that you will become aware of your stressors and your reactions by using the stress audit, and that you will let the stress audit help you reframe your thinking when you get stressed so that you can engage the rational part of your brain, that you will not let stressful feelings get too intense or linger for too long, and that you will recognize when you're overreacting to a situation or overgeneralizing, and that you will be more accepting of yourself and those around you. You are in charge of your mental health. You have choices and you have tools. You have now some awareness that will bring you knowledge. You can start doing the first step, the stop and audit, today. And you can always engage the help of an accountability buddy, a partner who can feed back to you what you need to be aware of, or help you negotiate difficult conversations. The point is, you don't have to go through things alone, especially during this difficult time when you're looking for a new position. So we talked about the fact that we were going to fill in this puzzle. Here's what we did. We learned how to build awareness through the stress audit. We learned how to interrupt negative thoughts through stop, take a breath, observe, and proceed. We talked about the characteristics of the stress reactions, which are overreaction and overgeneralization. And then we learned how to reality spin them. We talked about setting healthy boundaries and getting an accountability partner. So put in the chat what your biggest takeaway is. And while you're doing that, I leave you with this challenge. You cannot be there for your team, your customers, and all the other people in your life if you do not take care of yourself. Izzy says rewiring history. Kurt said ask yourself the 999. I love that one too. Peter says stop and take a breath. Stop acronym, says Josh. Stop and breathe, says Shannon. So what questions do you have? Please feel free to come off mute if you want to ask a question. So here is how you can claim your free Banish Burnout Toolkit by going to janicelitvin.com/resources. And if someone wants to put that in the chat so everyone has it. And you will be asked for your email address and you will be added to my mailing list, but I promise I do not send out very many emails, maybe 1 or 2 a month. And of course, you can always unsubscribe. Thank you, Laura. And I do workshops like this. I have a couple of other topics. Feel free to get in touch with me. And on the next slide, you will see a number of ways to reach me in the future. And I am especially active on LinkedIn. So you can either open your phone camera and shine it over this QR code, or you can enter my LinkedIn URL. And please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or email or phone me. Anytime you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And I especially would like to thank Laura and Fiona for their support and help through this process. So are there any questions? Otherwise, I'll pass it back to you, Laura.
Sure, I'm going to stop your screen there so we can have everybody on the screen. I don't know if anybody has any questions. I mean, Janice has an interesting background because she was also an executive recruiter. So she has different insight to things. So you can also pick her brain on that. Yeah. But yeah, open it up. If anybody has anything to share or any questions for her, it's always a good time to kind of have that open discussion, share ideas.
Maybe just a comment. Janice, the healthcare industry is fraught with burnout. It's one of the biggest components to attrition, turnover, retention. It's burnout. I'm not sure to what extent you're focused on healthcare industry, but if you have any specifics, I'd be interested to hear more.
There is a doctor who is very focused on this named, suddenly his name is flying out of my head, but I will send it to you. Jonathan Fisher, I believe, and he is on a quest to help physicians end burnout. And yes, it's a huge problem. The suicide rate in the healthcare industry was already getting high before COVID, and certainly all the problems that came out due to COVID has made their lives terribly difficult.
What was his name? Jonathan what?
Jonathan Fisher, Fisher.
Okay, thank you.
Look him up on LinkedIn. Tell him I sent you. We're good friends on LinkedIn. To the degree you have a friendship on LinkedIn. Okay. But actually, he and I write each other. So he's a wonderful, wonderful gentleman.
Thanks.
I don't understand why when doctors are in training, they're on these 24-hour or 48-hour work shifts, which is not only not good for them, it's not good for the patients. So I've never understood that. I remember when I had my babies, now 27, and at 6 o'clock in the morning, this resident who had been up all night came into the room I had had a cesarean, and she came in to remove the little staples, and she was all hyper, and you could tell she was really, really tired. And I said, you know what? I don't want to do this now. I'm feeding the baby. And she goes, well, someone will have to do it later. I said, I don't care. But I didn't want to say you've been up all night. I'm not letting you touch me. But it just, I could feel her energy.
I think that's a function of workload and demand, not enough supply.
Could be, yeah, could be. Anybody have any questions about the stress around looking for a job or negotiating salary or finding good leads?
Janice, one of my questions is, I like what you said about setting the boundaries, because as you know, especially in the ops role, COO role, there seems to be how many fires can you put out and how many ways can you improve the processes. So what are tools, is the resources, what have you found is a good way to set those boundaries within the first 90 days at a firm?
You mean in regard to having so many fires to put out? So you're walking into a very difficult situation.
And people taking your time. I like what you said, you know, my open door policies between 11 and 1 or something like that.
Yeah. I think it's just setting the tone at the very beginning of the relationship, not to say, oh no, I'm not going to let anybody in my office if there's a fire. They have to wait till my open door time. Of course, you're going to be reasonable, but you're also going to let your assistant and those around you know what you need in order to be the most productive and the most successful to help the company. So putting it in terms of what's good for the company and what's good for the team. And just knowing yourself and knowing how you like to work.
Yeah.
I think one of the hardest things for everybody is controlling their time. Whether you're an entrepreneur or you work in a large company, it's really, really hard to control time. And productivity is a huge, or lack of productivity is a huge burnout factor in getting burned out. So it's really, really important. You don't want to burn out, obviously.
Janice, do you have any suggestions, since you raised it around the salary negotiation, any tactics on not settling to get the offer, but not overshooting the mark to lose the offer?
Well, this came up, was it, Laura, was it last week or the week before this time? Oh, it was last week, wasn't it? We were talking about salary. And one person said she was worried that if she put too high a salary on the application, that she wouldn't get an offer or she wouldn't even get an interview. And I think it's really important to, number one, research the market, especially for the industry and the niche that you're going to, and know what the ranges are and do some research. There are all kinds of salary surveys on the internet by all kinds of large, Robert Half and some of those larger firms, or call an executive search firm like a Korn Ferry. And also know your limits with your money. I mean, if you're right over on the border, if they're offering you something that's a little bit low for you and you feel like you need to bump up, talk to them about what is the total compensation. Sometimes there are other factors in salary. It's not just about the base salary. I assume most of you know this. It's about the whole compensation. And sometimes there's give and take. Sometimes there's a higher base and a lower bonus. Whatever it is you need. I have a niece who's in sales, and when she was interviewing at Microsoft, she's very aggressive, and they wanted her to have a very low base and a much higher bonus package. And she just came right out and said, what is the possibility of starting me out on a higher base and lower bonus program, at least for the first year? So there's got to be some give and take. You're going to learn from Derek Arden when he comes, that it's got to be a win-win, or you're going to hang on to resentments. And so you've got to really make clear what your needs are. And I always recommended, when someone asked you what your salary range was, to give roughly speaking, around a $10,000 range.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions related to that, Peter?
No, I agree. You know, it is you know, if there's flexibility on signing bonus versus you know, whatever to get to a bogey, and you know, a signing bonus has more flexibility perhaps than building it into the base, which is a recurring number, and there's different ways to skin the cat.
And then if depending on the stock, if there is stock or stock options, if they're pre-IPO. Or maybe a car or free meals. I'm kidding, of course.
Yeah, if you didn't get the worksheet, Rich Horan was with us last week, and he shared a compensation worksheet. If anybody didn't download that and would like it, just shoot Fiona an email. She'll get that out to you. Great. It was pretty helpful.
But you're going you're going to have a really interesting speaker. So I recommended Derek Arden to Laura. He's out of the UK. And he even talks about things like the way you dress and where you sit. When we get back to face-to-face meetings, when you get to that conference room, he even talks about what position you should be in at the table. So you're going to learn a lot of very clever tricks and I'll attend that session too.
Well, very good. If there are no further questions, we've got Kathy Lieberman, who will be joining us next week, and she's going to talk about managing us through our transitions. And then Josh, are you still here on the call? Josh is going to talk with us. He's coming back to talk about articulating your proposition value. So, and we'll have it more of a workshop, so we'll be able to talk and share ideas. And then we've got Rick Clody, who is with an executive search firm in Nashville that Bill and I have known for a decade or more. And he's going to kind of be the, what's behind the curtain sort of things from the executive search industry. Those questions that you can ask anything that you wish of him. And we're looking forward to having him. So appreciate everybody being here today. It was nice to see Bill back with us today, and have a great week. And hopefully we'll see you next Tuesday.
Thank you, everybody, for being
Thank you, Janice, so much for being with us today.
I appreciate it.